I click continue. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Okay.
So, good afternoon.
Hi.
To start off with, would you like to say your name and where you are?
My name is Stephan Tobin, and I'm in West Lynn, Oregon, which is a suburb of Portland, Oregon.
Okay. And I mean, as you know, the first big question is, who are you? Who are you as a person, as a human being? And that can include your passions, your values, qualities about yourself, anything you'd like.
Yeah, I thought about that question, and I realized I had a hard time coming up with an answer. Uh, I see myself as uh, fulfilling a number of roles: a husband, a a father to three adult children and three grandchildren, a psychologist, um, Gestalt therapist mostly, but more I would consider myself an integrative therapist. But sort of overall, and taking a look at my life, I'm kind of an explorer, an adventurer. Um, Not a physical adventure. I don't like taking chances physically. Uh, I've spent a little time on a horse and I don't like it. I don't like riding a horse. I like looking at horses and
Mhm.
even petting them, but I don't like being on them.
Okay.
And I did a little bit of downhill skiing. I didn't like that. But but as far as exploring ideas, relationships, that I've really done my whole life. And even though I'm in my 80s, I'm still doing that, learning new things all the time, uh, delighting in my work as a therapist. I mean, I'm way past the age that most people have retired, but I don't want to retire because I just love the work that I do. And I really enjoy working with my clients. So I see myself as growing all the time. And most people that I know tell me I'm uh, um, I provide what I, that's one thing that at my age, I'm losing certain words all the time. Uh, what is the word when somebody really admires you and sees you?
They appreciate you. They enjoy you. I'm sorry, there's literally a giant marching band going down my street right
Oh,
now
is that
for no
right?
apparent reason. That's why I'm muted. Um, yeah.
No, I can't think of the word. That annoys me that but I, I provide somebody that they look up to and admire, and they're kind of impressed by me that I'm so healthy at my age. So anyway, okay, yeah. The thing I want to say is that I feel like I'm a better therapist than ever, uh, and I work with all different clients, all different ages. I have a 17-year-old boy and a 19-year-old girl, and they're really quite difficult in some ways. But I like the fact that I like their difficulty. I have to kind of work with them, and I realize I have to teach them a lot of stuff they didn't get from their own parents.
Mm.
And then I have some very, very uh, accomplished people who are brilliant and doing and very creative. So I have all kinds, and I like working with all of them. I like
Hmm.
stretching myself in that way.
Hmm. Okay, so I mean, more about yourself as a person. Would you say that there's any particular set of values or principles that you sort of organize around or try to hold?
Yeah, very, very, very definitely. Um, I have a great appreciation, a love for the planet and nature, and taking care of it, which is very, very upsetting to me that so many people don't seem to be interested in that. I've always been a member of a number of environmental groups, and just donating money to them, uh, not being much of an activist, but uh, that's a value that's very, very important to me.
Mm.
Keeping keeping the planet healthy, which we're not doing in Oregon. It's just awful. You know, my wife and I moved here, as I said earlier, because we thought it was so beautiful here and the air was so clear. And now it's very, very smoky, and much of the state has been destroyed.
Hmm.
So that goes against my value, which is really appreciating nature.
It's really painful to see happen and to feel happen. Hmm.
Yeah.
So
And
another, oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
Well, the truth, facts. Um, when I have a PhD rather than a PsyD degree, so I had to do experiment in college, in graduate school, and so I really respect science and value what it says, and a lot of what psychological science says could be very, very helpful if people would listen to it. You know, politicians, Trump, and but I've also developed uh, a spirituality too in the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. Um, Respect for Buddhism, and I've been very impressed with Eva and Steve, their book, and talking with them about uh, meditation and seeing how Buddhist ideas really, really fit with Gestalt therapy theory.
Hmm.
So even though I've always been very concrete, sort of anti-spirituality, the woo-woo stuff. My wife is very, very much into that sort of stuff.
Hmm.
And I am becoming more into it too, because I see that it helps me to feel more joy, more
Mm.
connected.
Mm. Sorry, can you just tip your camera down a little bit? You're sort of sliding off the screen at the bottom there. There we go. Yeah. No, but I mean, definitely, I agree that we all find different parts of ourselves at different times as we need them, right? So,
Right.
hmm, okay. So, another question, and I'm sure different parts of you will keep coming out as we talk, but another question is what comes to mind in your history as an event or as a set of circumstances in your life that have really shaped or impacted somehow who you are?
I've had a lot of painful experiences. I can't I, right now. I can't single out one in particular. They've been very painful, but I've managed to grow from each one of them and learn. So that's something that I like about myself, is that I'm able to do that.
Mhm.
I'm quite resilient.
Okay.
Like I played tennis for many years, and I actually was very good at it. That's another quality that I have, is about I'm very tenacious. I keep trying. I could take kept taking lessons, trying to improve my backhand, and was playing doubles mostly since I moved to Oregon, occasionally singles. And I decided I played with three other guys doubles, and one of the guys, Bob Edelstein, who's a good friend, um, and I were the two worst players. So we would play with one of the better players. But the side that I was on, you practically always lost. And I kind of got tired of that. So I decided to give up tennis and I turned to table tennis. And actually, table tennis, I'm actually much better at. So I joined this table tennis club. I was easily the oldest player there, but taking lessons and improving and, playing matches and stuff, I really enjoy doing that. I can't do it now, even though the club is open. My wife doesn't want me to do that, so I'm
Yeah.
respecting her wish.
Well, I mean, with the table between you, you're more than 6 feet apart, right? Technically
I
speaking.
know, I know. They have the table spread apart,
Yeah.
but if you're balls go all over the place, and
Yeah.
you, so it's kind of dangerous. At my
Mhm.
age, it's something I can't afford to do, and I don't want to worry my wife.
Mhm.
So
Well, and that's actually another question, if you don't mind, which is, how are you experiencing your age?
um, well, I noticed, that I have trouble doing stuff that I used to do easily. I have one of the hardest part playing table tennis was picking up the ball. And recently I investigated the possibility of getting some surgery in my lower back because it's arthritic and my spinal column has decreased. It's like 3 centimeters or millimeters, something like that, where the usual is like 11 or 13. So, and that's affected my motility.
Hmm.
Um, that's one of the things that's been affected. I decided not to do that. I just do a lot of stretching.
Hmm.
Uh, I've done a lot of stretching for years. It's kept me very mobile. The neurologist who looked at my chart said that he was amazed I was walking, let alone how mobile I am.
Hmm.
And I still do. I bought a stationary bicycle that I use since I can't play table tennis now. I use that as a aerobic exercise, and I have weights that I lift. And uh, so anyway, I don't like losing words. Words that I used to. But I just look it up in the dictionary. In fact, while you were away, I got my thesaurus up and saw that to see if I could pick that word, but I couldn't.
Did you find it? No.
No, I
It's
didn't.
still high. Okay.
I looked up admire and see what what words are similar to
Hmm.
that. It can come up. Maybe
Yeah.
it'll occur to me. It's one
I'm
of the
sure
things
it
that
will.
I notice is that if I can't think of a word or a name or something like that, a while later it will pop into my mind. So
It
I'm not
wanders
that
back.
upset, you know.
Mhm.
I, sorry about that. Does
Mhm.
that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And actually, another question that I do have for you is, in sort of your lived history of experiences, who comes to mind as a person who has had a particular influence on you?
I'd say a lot of people. Certainly, Fritz Perls had an influence on me. Um, some political figures, FDR, people that I've known. Bob Stallero
Hmm.
is
Would you like to say how any of those have influenced you?
well. Yeah, I'm probably one of the few uh, remaining people who actually worked with Fritz Perls.
Mm-hmm.
And I met him in the 60s at Esalen. I went to the University of Michigan for graduate school because it was one school that had a really good reputation in the Department of Psychology. And the clinical, it had a strong Freudian clinical part. And in those days, if you were in graduate school and wanted to study clinical psychology, your choices were behaviorism or Freudianism.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't interested in behaviorism at all. So I went to Michigan and I was trained in Freudian and analytic therapy, but it really didn't suit me. Um, I got a job after graduating at UCLA in the departments of psychiatry and psychology, and I was only there for 3.5 years, and then I decided to go into private practice. But when I went to Esalen. A friend of mine, Ed Mopin, he was a friend of mine in graduate school and also worked at UCLA. He went up there and came back raving about the place. So I decided to check it out. I went up for a week-long workshop with Virginia Satir and met Fritz. He wasn't doing workshops yet. He was living in one of the cabins and was reputed to dropping a lot of acid. And but he would do a dream workshop one evening for people that were attending workshops here. So I went to this um, dream workshop and I worked with him. And the work that I did, actually, I realized later on, really wasn't all that impressive. I think I was doing what he wanted me to do.
Mm.
I had a very difficult relationship with my mother, and I ended up talking to her. He had me have a dialogue with her, and I expressed a lot of anger toward her. And I said, "Fuck you, mother," at one point, and he said, "Say it louder." So I said it louder, and then he said, "Say it even louder." And I said it louder, and I kicked over the chair. It was a folding chair in front of me. But I realized I did that because he kind of expected me to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
I was impressed enough by him that I decided to come back for a workshop just with him. And to me, that was a real eye opener. Instead of sitting back, making interpretations, which I had learned to do at Michigan and did in the small private practice I had while I was working at UCLA, which really didn't suit me. I've always been a kind of anxious person, fidgety, and that really didn't suit me. It was too cognitive, too intellectual. And here Fritz was doing what he felt like doing. And to me, it was epical watching him at Esalen in this round building that they had built for him. He lived in one of the rooms, and then there was this big room, and it was overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Big Sur. And his uh, he was just very experimental, and that really impressed me. I saw that there was a different way of doing therapy,
Mm.
and the theory. I just kind of the theory just really made a lot of sense to me. The theory of Gestalt. So I decided there and then I was going to become a Gestalt therapist, and I had several workshops with Fritz and some with Fritz and Jim Simpkin. I went into therapy with Jim Simpkin, was in group and individual therapy with him for a number of years, and then got a bunch of psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers to form a training group that Jim led.
Okay.
And then I helped to found. Is this okay if I'm?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
And then I decided around the same time as Bob Resnick and some other people to start a training institute. So we founded the Gestalt Therapy Institute of Los Angeles.
Hmm.
and trained people for years, and we did like workshops for the whole community, 1 day workshops like twice a year or so, and training workshops in Europe and in Los Angeles in the wintertime. Uh, so I would say that Fritz had a tremendous impact on me, and I realized later on, not completely positive.
Okay.
I'll tell you about that. Um, I began to realize in working, I discarded my psychoanalytic training and way of working.
Okay.
Fritz he was trained as an analyst himself, although I think he probably was not a very good one, frankly. Uh, he described Fritz's thing was that just ordinary communication. There were three kinds. It was all shit. There was chicken shit, which is what went on between people just talking to each other, being phony, covering up stuff. And then there was uh, bullshit, which was psychoanalytic theory. And then there was elephant shit, which was Gestalt therapy theory.
Hmm.
He was very anti-theory when I knew him, even Gestalt theory. He was very much for being in the present. One of his favorite sayings was lose your mind and come to your senses.
Hmm.
Um, and really trying to work with people. And these were training groups for therapists who tended to be rather cognitive and obsessional. And his thing was to try to get them to be more in their senses.
Right.
And that's something that has always stuck with me. Uh, it's something I forgot to mention earlier. One of the things that I have learned to do is, instead of being a very left brain thinking type of person, more right brain. My wife has really helped me with that. She's incredibly perceptive, very visual. And I've
Hmm.
always been sort of an auditory type person. That's why I have represented my world as hearing. But I've learned to be more visual and to just kind of expand my perception so that I'm taking in the whole scene instead of focusing on it and thinking about it.
Hmm. Okay.
Uh,
So I'm not sure what the negative part that about
Okay, all right.
Charles's influence, because you
I'm
said
glad
you,
you
I
asked
mean,
about that.
yeah, you
So
abandoned the psychoanalytical, but
yeah, so I'm a Gestalt therapist. I went into private practice. Gestalt therapy was very popular in those days. Got lots
mhm.
of clients coming to me, and uh, and I imitated Fritz, and I imitated Jim. And one of the things that I found about me and Jim and other people is that they imitated Fritz.
Okay.
The first time I met Jim Simkin, I had this individual appointment with him. I said to him, "You sound just like Fritz." There was a way of that Fritz talked where he ended every sentence like a question mark. And that's what Jim did. He didn't like hearing that. But what I began to realize later on was that it was sort of like interjecting Fritz and his way of working
Mm.
rather than really assimilating it, chewing it up. That was something that Fritz really emphasized, particularly in his book, Ego, Hunger, and Aggression,
Right.
chewing up instead of swallowing whole. And I began to realize I wasn't very effective with some clients of mine. And so, and I remember one very, very important experience I had. I was in a group of a consultation group, a leaderless consultation group with therapists from various schools. There was a Kleinian. There were a couple of object relations theorists, and there was another Gestalt therapist and myself. And when we would talk about our clients, and then, by the way, I much prefer the word client than patient.
Okay.
You know, patient to me it smacks of the medical model, which I think Gestalt therapy gets away from, really, the humanistic part of it. Um, and I remember talking about a client of mine that was clearly had a lot of borderline symptoms, it was very difficult. And they seemed to understand her better than I did. And so I began to realize slowly that there were new developments in psychoanalysis that I didn't know anything about.
Mm.
Object relations theory, um, ego psychology. So what I eventually did was I got into therapy with a self-psychologically oriented psychoanalyst
Mm.
so that I could begin to experience what they called a self disorder. I realized I was very narcissistic. I was pretty good at being confrontive, using the techniques, the empty chair technique, and what are you doing with your hands and that sort of thing. And a lot of my clients did benefit from that, but I began to realize that some didn't, that what I was doing was promoting shame
Mm.
in them. See, one of the things that I realized about Fritz is his thing was you wipe your own ass. You know, you don't you don't suck off of other people. And I realized in that first workshop that I went with him to with him, I was pretty assertive, and he really liked that. I was confrontive. I confronted other people in the group. He liked that, and his praise of me just really made me very excited. And so, but I began to try to get close to him. I wanted to, my father died when I was 17. So I was kind of
Mm.
looking for a father figure. He didn't like that. He wanted you to idealize him, but he didn't want you to depend on him. So he began to be kind of uh, rejecting of me.
Mm.
At the end of the workshop, this is a very important experience. The end of the workshop was a Sunday afternoon, and everybody went around and he asked people to say what they resented and what they appreciated. And then when everybody was done, the workshop was over, people went up to hug him. I went up to hug him. I put my arms around him, and I suddenly realized his arms weren't around me.
Mm.
And I stepped back and I looked at him, and he had this smile on his face. And so I realized that I was wanting something from him, and this was a no-no. I wasn't wiping my own ass. So what I learned is what you had to do with Fritz and also with Jim Simpkin is to pretend to be independent.
Mm.
I did a good job of that, pretending. But I needed to work through some infantile issues that I had. And that's what I got from the psychoanalyst that I was in therapy with for years.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw that that I didn't like that way of working, and I thought Gestalt therapy still had a lot to offer. So I ended up sort of bringing that into my work, and I eventually wrote an article, uh, Integration of Self-Psychology and Gestalt Therapy, that was published by Joe Weissong in the Gestalt Journal.
Mm.
He liked my article. He told me that there was a member of the Gestalt Therapy Institute that told him not to publish the article,
Oh.
but he did anyway. And a lot of Gestalt therapists around the country liked what I had to say. I would appear at conferences, but the people in my own institute didn't.
Mm.
And I realized I was pretty naive. I thought, oh, they're going to be happy that I'm developing, I'm growing and changing. But I realized one woman in particular said that she felt insulted because I was implicitly criticizing her, this Gestalt way of working. I said in the article that Gestalt therapy wasn't dealing with developmental issues,
Right.
was not really dealing with the I-thou relationship, which, you know, Fritz Perls was not really dealing with field therapy theory. I saw him treat people in his workshops where I think he was afraid. But instead of saying that, instead of saying, I'm afraid of you, there was one guy in particular who had been a member of a gang when he was younger, and he was actually a professor, but he had this kind of hostile quality to him. And he wanted to work with Fritz. He kind of lunged, and Fritz said, I'm not going to work with you. Well, I can understand Fritz doing that in the moment, but I thought later on, I thought what he should have done was to reflect and say to the guy, hey, I'm scared of you. And that would have helped the man to
Mm.
realize something important about him. But the way that Fritz dealt with him, the guy just felt crushed.
Oh.
So the point that I'm making is that I began to realize that the way I was working with a lot of people, while helpful for some, wasn't really helpful for people that had, I don't know, pre-Oedipal issues,
Okay.
people that had issues having to do with uh, poor relationships with their parents, where they hadn't developed feelings of self-confidence and self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I went into that, began to explore self-psychology. And then later on, Bob Stoller's intersubjectivity. He started out in self-psychology and then saw uh, some flaws in it, and so developed his own theory, which fits very much in with Gestalt therapy. Eva and Steve agree with that and are upset about the fact that he doesn't pay any credence to Gestalt therapy. Lynn Jacobs worked with in supervision with Bob Stoller for years, and they still work together. Lynn is a psychoanalyst, as you probably know, as well as a Gestalt therapist.
Mm.
So, and I think a lot of Gestalt therapists, perhaps with I having something to do with it, began to change in the way they worked and the way they theorized. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Relational, now they call it relational Gestalt,
Mm-hmm.
which is um, really adhering to the field theoretical emphasis in Gestalt therapy, that who you are in the moment, in our interaction, is partly what you bring to the situation, but also what I'm bringing to it, our interaction. And who I am in this moment is partly everything that I bring to it in terms of my what Stoller calls organizing principles, and who you are as I see you looking at me, you know. So to me, that's very, very important, and it's part of the Gestalt theory.
I mean, it's so much so that it's even part of our question structure, right? I mean, we ask you, who are you? What are you bringing? What are your values? What do you organize around?
Yeah.
What field are you coming from? And so, I mean, if I can actually bring that a little bit back to you, I'm curious what it really is. I mean, beyond, not that I'm not appreciating it, but just beyond the development history. And I'm understanding that you're saying this, from your own personal experience and of those changes and of those realizations. But what is it that has really come to define your work and the things that you orient around?
Well, I feel like I have a lot of wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not being arrogant when I say that. I have a lot of knowledge because I've studied a lot of different kinds of therapy. I spent 3 years in neo-Reichian therapy and training. Um, I spent some time in transpersonal psychology, learning stuff from that. So I can bring to my work a lot of knowledge about people's issues, but also a curiosity and not having a rigid idea. Like I might throw out a possibility to a client, and if they reject it, then it's wrong, and that's okay with me. Yeah. So I bring to my work this curiosity and interest, and also I try to keep in mind that I'm having an impact on that client, who they see me. They may see me very different from the way I see myself, and that's okay with me.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. I was talking with Steve about a client that he referred to me, and he said that he worked with her individually a little bit, but that he, well, maybe this is somewhat a violation of confidence. I probably shouldn't go into that, but anyway, that I have to be aware and really acutely aware, looking at the client and and trying to pick up ways that they may be seeing me that are negative, some negative transference. To use a,
Mhm.
so I try to really be curious about that person and not have fixed ideas.
Mhm.
Is that
Yep, yep, that
clear?
makes sense. So another question would be what particular challenges you identify have been significant for you? Um, and it can be clinically, I mean, a particular client even that you ran up against a wall with, or academically, or within the Gestalt community. I mean, you say you published your article and it was not well received, and I'm sure there's been other conflicts like that since, but what comes to mind as your most significant challenge?
Well, that was a significant challenge. I was a trainer in the Gestalt Therapy Institute since its inception for about 15 years. And I was naive. I was really fucked up in a lot of ways. But I had a lot of conflicts and I felt a lot of pain. Eventually, I and four other trainers quit the institute and Gestalt Therapy Institute, and I went off and I started doing my own training, which was a sort of a combination of self psychology and Gestalt therapy. I had these training groups, and people would come to me, and there were like 15-week sessions, and I did a lot of reading in the self psychology and other infant development, and every once in a while, I had friends that were still in the institute, and they would ask me to come to a meeting or something like that, and I would do that. There was still a lot of conflict that went on in the institute, and it finally broke up, and people went on to form their own institute. Gary Yuntif and Lynn Jacobs formed theirs. Bob Resnick formed his. But that was a very, very painful experience for me. And
Mm-hmm.
because of the pain, I sort of like got out of the Gestalt community.
Hmm.
But when I moved up to Oregon and connected with Steve and Eva and John Frew, then I got back into it. They had read my articles. I wrote an article on self psychology as an integration of of existential humanistic philosophy and psychoanalysis that was very well received. It was published in the Journal of Humanistic Psychology, and they had read the article and had cited me in articles that they wrote. So then I got back into the Gestalt therapy community, and
And that, I mean, that is difficult because some people really identify, I've noticed when I ask about this, they identify with their institutional community. And so if their
right.
institutional community breaks up, I mean, there's really the sense of being a child of divorce. And, whose side are you on? Is this my fault? Did my group make this blow up? Was it something I said? But do you feel like you've become part of a larger Gestalt community or a different kind of Gestalt community?
Well, Steve and Eva have had this wonderful training group for years. You know, they invited me a couple of times to come in and be a sort of a guest trainer, but I'm not really part of their institute.
Mhm.
There's sort of a vague Gestalt community in the Portland area that I feel like I'm part of, but it's not. And we've begun to do these salons, which I presented at last February, but it's not a formal organization at all.
Okay.
So I can't say that I'm part of an institute.
Yeah, I mean, more than an institute, a sense of community. Like, does a Gestalt community mean anything to you? Is that something
Yeah,
that you feel
yeah,
part of?
sure, sure. Yeah,
Mhm. Okay.
yeah. We have occasionally we were meeting every month for a while, but the people that came usually it was at Steve and Eva's house. Uh, the for some reason or another, the, the attendance began to dwindle, so we
Hmm.
finally stopped it. So I don't know, but I'm answering your question. I
I mean,
don't. I don't.
it's yeah, sometimes, I mean, the sense of community comes and goes, and for some people, it's like a really, it's how they orient themselves in their lives. I mean,
Yeah.
being in a Gestalt world, whatever that means.
Right.
Um,
I
so yeah,
can't.
I mean, any answer is fine. I really have no
I can't say
expectations.
that I can't say that I feel that way. See, I've always been kind of an outsider in a way. I was an only child, and it's partly my fault because any organization that I've been part of, I've always been kind of critical of it. I picked out the problems with it. I was certainly part of the Gestalt community in Los Angeles for years, but I began to realize that there were problems there, and I'm not the kind of person that keeps my mouth shut.
Hmm.
I think I made enemies, and I wasn't sensitive enough. I was too narcissistic to really appreciate that I was uh, antagonizing them, and I didn't feel worthwhile enough to realize that that I was having perhaps a fairly powerful effect on them, impact.
Mm. Hmm.
So part of
That's
my
interesting.
growth is to feel really worthwhile. I didn't for many years. That was part of the thing that I got into a psychoanalysis for, that I realized I felt like shit.
Oh, well, it's a good thing that, you can get over that. So
Yeah,
I was actually going to ask you, how has Gestalt affected you as a person?
Gestalt.
Hmm.
Well, the sense that we're all connected, that we're all and not only connected with each other, but connected with nature. I've liked in studying other cultures where the concept or sense of a bounded self doesn't exist.
Hmm.
Many years ago, my ex-wife had a book by an anthropologist named Barbara Lee, and that had quite an impact on me. She actually studied uh, indigenous cultures that didn't have that sense of a bounded self. Like there was with the Wintu Indians of Northern California, they didn't even have a name for themselves that was separate from the context they happened to be in.
Hmm.
So, like my name, if I were Wintu Indian, would be Heather Stephan, Heather hyphen Stephan. They they felt connected to rocks, to trees. They wouldn't cut down a tree to make a house because the tree has an existence of its own. And that's that kind of connection that I really respect and value. When you talk about value earlier,
Hmm.
that's very important to me. that feeling of connectedness, not wanting uh, to use something or someone for my benefit.
Okay. And another question for you, if I can switch to this now, would be sort of on the other side of the challenges. And I mean, I'm curious about what you would consider some of or one of your greatest moments or one of your highlights in a Gestalt context or in your other aspects of your life, however you'd like. But if there's a moment either in your process or training or with a client that really sort of stands out to you as, this is my story, you know, this is the good one, would you like to share that?
Had a lot of peak experiences. I, I'll tell you what comes to mind is the first session I had with the most prominent neo-Reichian therapist in Los Angeles. He's a chiropractor named Phil Kirkarudo, and he he would get people into very, very deep breathing and work on various parts of your body to release what Wilhelm Reich talked. I forget what he called them, but like bands of tightness. There were like 7 of them. It sort of somewhat similar to the chakras. And I released a lot of stuff, and I went home, and I didn't sleep all night, but I was really high. I realized so much of what I was containing in my body was gone, and I just felt so free. And that's an experience that comes to me.
Okay.
Recently, I had an experience. I read a book that Steve recommended called No Self, No Problem. It's by a psychologist who also knows a lot about the brain. And he's talking about comparing the left brain and the right brain. And I was sitting up in my bedroom, which is quite beautiful. My wife is very creative. She's an artist, created this beautiful room. It's a big bedroom. And I just sat back, and instead of looking at individual objects, I looked at the whole room for the first time. And that was a peak experience. To experience the whole room instead of focusing on this object, this object, this object. I've always tended to look at things and then to comment on in my brain. It drives me crazy. I can't just look at something and enjoy it. You know, I've got to
Can you
think.
turn that guy off? You know.
But I began to do that more. And we live in a very beautiful area. The Willamette River is nearby, and we have a beautiful park. and really beginning to experience being in the moment, which Fritz Perls was preaching many, many years ago, and being able to do that without thinking about it. So that's something I've been experiencing lately. You know, I don't have too many more years to live, and I used to kind of worry about that. But most of the time I don't, because I'm really experiencing the present. I'm really in the present, and I'm not dying right now. You know, I'm really I'm enjoying this with you right now, and I'm where I'm just blabbering away. I'm not thinking about what I'm saying. This may come out very badly.
It's working fine. It's
but I'm enjoying
conversation. Yeah.
And I see you smiling.
Yeah.
I see feeling love for you, Heather.
Oh, thank you. I'm appreciating you, and I'm appreciating that you're sharing this, and that I mean, it's not simple. It can take a lot of years to
It
just
has.
be. Like it's not simple stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you say you may not have that many years left, I'm glad that you're able to be. because there's probably nothing worse than, you know, leaving something before you've ever really been there. So I'm glad that you're being.
I have clients that are much younger than me. I think one guy in particular is always worrying about dying. I'm much older than he is, and I don't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying the present.
Well, that sounds good.
When I begin to, when my memory really begins to go and I experience a lot of physical problems, I may feel differently. But at least right now,
But we're not there yet, right?
yeah, I'm not.
And you just bought kittens, you said. So, I mean, it's kind of like
Oh,
green bananas. I don't think you would buy kittens on your way right out. So,
and the thing, I'm loving these kittens. We've had a lot of cats, my wife and I. I love dogs too, but we don't live in a place where we don't have a fenced-in yard,
mhm.
So we've had cats, and we keep them inside. They don't get out because we don't get hurt or get diseases. And I'm feeling more love for these kittens and more delight in them than I have ever felt for a cat before.
Hmm,
And I think that's because I've continued to grow.
wonderful. And I mean, really, the last question that I have is what's next? What do you think would be next for you? Is there anything important that you see coming up for Gestalt?
For Gestalt therapy,
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see Gestalt therapy be more recognized in the world because I think the theory is wonderful. And the emphasis on relation, on contact, on what I call field theory, but I don't think they Gestalt therapists call it that. Uh, but it's the feeling that we're connected, that we're all connected, that this idea of a separate bounded self, as they say in Buddhism, is a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And the the more we dispense with that, the more joy we feel and the more connectedness we feel with everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's uh, that's something that I wish. I don't think I have a website and I have a blog and I write things that are interesting to me. And a lot of them have a Gestalt therapy kind of emphasis, but I don't, I don't, I don't presume that I will have any impact on Gestalt therapy becoming more well known and popular. But I think it's a wonderful theory. What Pearl Zephyrin and Goodman wrote in 1950, I think, is 51, published then. It's just wonderful
Mm-hmm.
and fits well in with Buddhism too, which Stephen either point out in their book.
Mm-hmm.
So I
So,
know what
is there anything else that you in particular would like to do? Your unfinished business list, you know, is there anything Gestalty left on there that you would like to do?
I just want to keep living and enjoying my life. I don't have any particular plans. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have, I have friends that say, oh, they want to stop working and retiring so they can travel. And I used to really like to travel a lot. And that was a big emphasis of mine. But now I can't anyway because of the coronavirus. I can't travel. I would like to. I'd like to travel uh, when this virus ends, and if I'm capable of doing so, I'd like to travel someplace. I really enjoy that. My wife and I really have a great time when we travel. We fight a lot when we're at home, but we travel. We do very well together and have a
Right.
time. But I can't think of any particular big plans I have or goals.
Hmm. That almost sounds nice to me because it's kind of like having done it, you know, not having done everything, but not being left with a longing.
Yeah,
That sounds like a nice place to be,
it
actually.
is. It feels good. I used to have longings. I used to have longing, and I will always something in the future I was going to do. I don't do that anymore. So it's a nice place to be in.
Hmm. Well, is that an okay place to leave you for now, or is there anything else that you feel you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think this is this is I like what I've done here. It's like this process of talking to you has been kind of a self-exploration process.
Hmm.
I worried about what I was going to say. You know, I thought about different questions I saw that you asking other people and how I would answer them. And I've just dispensed with that. So I've been very spontaneous and free. And I
Yeah, I
like
appreciate that. It's been an interesting process. So thank you.
good,
If that's
good.
okay with you, I really appreciated your time and what you've been sharing, and I would guess we'll leave it here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.